One flower can make your mouth tingle. One root bleeds red when it breaks. One leaf feels like a bandage. And one strange plant belongs to a world older than flowers themselves. These are not fantasy plants. They are real. And some may be growing closer than you think. Your backyard is not a hospital. It is not a pharmacy. And these plants do not replace doctors. But before medicine came in bottles, people looked at leaves, roots, flowers, and weeds with a different kind of attention. Some of that knowledge was useful, some was misunderstood, and some was dangerous. Today, we are looking at 10 plants people once trusted in moments of pain, illness, or injury, not as medical advice, but as forgotten plant history. Because the wildest thing about these plants is not that people used them. It is how much they noticed. 1. Toothache plant. This flower does something your brain does not expect. Imagine biting into a small flower. At first, nothing. Then a slow electricity begins. Your tongue, your gums, the whole inside of your mouth. Not pain, something stranger. Like your face has fallen slightly asleep. This is Acmella oleracea. It contains a compound called spillenthal, associated with the strange tingling, numbing sensation people feel when they chew the flower head. Folk herbalists across South America, Southeast Asia, and West Africa use the flower head for toothache. Not a cure, a silence. But toothache is often a sign of infection. Numbing the signal does not treat the source. A tooth that hurts needs a dentist, not a flower. But the next plant has a far darker story, one that bleeds before it warns you. 2. Bloodroot. This is the plant that looks innocent until you cut it. In early spring, a small white flower pushes through the forest floor. 8 thin petals, almost too fragile to exist. It looks like something gentle. Then pull back the leaf, break the root open, and it bleeds. A thick, dark red-orange sap, the color of old blood. It stains everything it touches. This is Sanguinaria canadensis, bloodroot. In the wrong product, the wrong dose, or the wrong hands, it does not heal tissue. It can destroy it. There are documented cases of permanent scarring, skin eaten away by products marketed as cures. Tissue gone, not healed. Gone. Powerful does not mean safe. We share this not as a curiosity to touch or try, but as a story of the distance between what a plant looks like and what it can actually do. The next plant is softer, in every sense. 3. Jewelweed. Touch it once and it explodes. Barely brush a ripe seed pod. Pop. Seeds fly. The plant flings its future sideways, one of the most involuntarily satisfying things in the natural world. But jewelweed carries a second story. This plant loves water. Creek banks, wet ditches, shaded trail edges. And it has a suspicious habit, growing right beside poison ivy. Folk herbalists took careful notice. Break the juicy stem. Press it against skin that touched the ivy. People passed this practice down across North American traditions. The science has been mixed. Some studies found promise. Others found no benefit beyond a plain water rinse. The research is not settled. If you brush against poison ivy, wash with soap and water as soon as possible. Jewelweed is a story. Soap and water is the first action. Next, a plant so tall it was once set on fire on purpose, and it worked. 4. Mullein. This weed once became a torch. Picture a dry summer field, and rising above everything, 6 feet tall, silver green, perfectly still. One plant that looks like it was put there on purpose. Mullein. Soft gray leaves as big as your forearm. A spike of tight yellow flowers at the top. Before candles and kerosene, the dried stalks were dipped in tallow and lit. Mullein became a walking torch. People called it hag's taper, candlewick plant. It had a dozen names because it was impossible to ignore. In folk medicine, the leaves were steeped for coughs and colds. Sometimes the dried leaf was even smoked for congestion. Ancient use does not automatically mean proven benefit. What mullein truly is a lessons in attention. People noticed it, named it obsessively, found uses for every part. That is why mullein belongs in this list. Not because every old use was right, but because people treated the plant like a tool, for light, for warmth, for breathing, for survival. The next plant is smaller than your shoe. So easy to miss. Most people step over it their entire lives. 5. Self-heal. A plant this small should not be called heal-all, but for centuries people called it exactly that. Low-growing, small purple flowers. Happy in lawns, pathways, field edges. You have walked over it, many times, without noticing. In European folk medicine, Prunella vulgaris was a wound herb, a throat herb, a fever herb. People reached for it broadly. Hopefully, the way you reach for something when you are afraid and it is all you have. The name heal-all was not given ironically. It was given with longing. Self-heal does not heal all. No plant does. But it carried people's hope for centuries. And that, too, is a kind of history. The next plant has a name just as bold. But it comes with a darker warning underneath. 5 plants in, and the pattern should be clear. These plants were not magic, they were memory. People watched what numbed, what stained, what softened, what seemed to calm pain, what seemed to make a wound feel covered. Sometimes they were right, sometimes they were wrong, and sometimes the same plant that helped in one situation harmed in another. That is why this history matters, not because we should go backward, but because attention itself is something worth recovering. 6. Comfrey. Its nickname sounds impossible. Knitbone. As if this plant could take something broken and weave it back together. Comfrey has been used in folk medicine for over 2,000 years. Greek and Roman physicians wrote about it. It crossed continents. It survived everything. Herbalists applied crushed poultices to bruises, sprains, swollen joints. People felt something ease. They passed it down. The name knitbone stayed because something about it felt true. But comfrey has a darker side. It should never be taken internally. Not as tea, not as tincture, not in any form. And never on open wounds. It contains compounds that can damage the liver if consumed. Help and harm can grow from the same root. Historically, the safer traditional use was external and cautious, and even then, not on open wounds. The name knitbone made the plant sound gentle. The chemistry was not gentle at all. The next plant is the opposite of danger. Soft, quiet, built, it seems, for contact. 7. Lamb's ear. This leaf feels less like a plant than a piece of cloth. Pick one up. Dense silver-white fuzz. Almost felt. Almost something made by hand. It does not feel like it grew. It feels like it was woven. Lamb's ear, named for the soft inner ear of a lamb, which it resembles almost exactly. In folk traditions, the large leaves were pressed against small wounds and cuts. Improvised bandages before bandages existed. In a world before sterile gauze, a soft, large, clean leaf pressed against a cut was not nothing. Today, we have sterile gauze for a reason, but the instinct is easy to understand. In that moment, the leaf was not medicine. It was a human attempt to protect what was open. Next, a plant whose most famous descendant is sitting in a bag in someone's pantry right now, and almost no one knows where it came from. 8. Marshmallow plant. Before the marshmallow was a confection, before it came soft and white in a plastic bag, it was a plant growing in salt marshes and damp meadows across Europe and Western Asia. Althea officinalis, the marshmallow plant. The candy took its name, then forgot where the name came from. Ancient Egyptians reportedly made sweets from the root, mixed with honey, as far back as 2,000 years ago. By the 19th century, French confectioners were whipping the starchy root extract into something lighter and airier. Then gelatin and corn syrup replaced the plant entirely. The candy survived. The plant was almost forgotten. The root contains mucilage, a thick, gel-like substance that made the plant valuable in traditional preparations for irritated throats and dry coughs. That is why folk herbalists reached for it in stories of dry coughs, sore throats, and the feeling of fire in the throat that would not leave. A silky, quiet relief that tasted faintly of the earth it came from. Persistent cough, fever, difficulty breathing. Those need a doctor, not a root. Next, something that makes this look like a young plant. Something that watched entire eras rise and fall, and is still here. 9. Horsetail. This plant belongs to a world before flowers. Slim green stems, perfect geometric joints, thin branches fanning outward in whorls. It looks like nothing else growing today, because it belongs to another time. The Equisetum genus is one of the oldest living plant lineages on Earth. Their ancestors were enormous trees, canopy giants, in a world before dinosaurs. Today's horsetail is a small, modest survivor, but it carries that ancient lineage intact. It also carries silica, in such concentration that dried horsetail was historically used to scrub pots and polish metal. A plant that could clean your cookware. Folk traditions associated it with hair, nails, bone, the body's hard and structural things. People trusted it with what they wanted to last. And this is one of the plants where admiration must not turn into casual use. But identification here is critical. Some related species are toxic. Long-term use can deplete vitamin B1. This plant demands careful identification and restraint. One plant remaining, growing in sidewalk cracks as we speak. 10. Shepherd's purse. You may have stepped on this plant today. It grows in sidewalk cracks. Parking lots. The edges of places that have been paved over, built over, forgotten. Its name, shepherd's purse, comes from the small triangular seed pods that hang from its stems like tiny heart-shaped pouches. Like the leather purses shepherds once carried in the field, worn at the hip, full of small necessary things. In folk traditions across Europe and Asia, this plant was used in connection with bleeding, nosebleeds, minor wounds, heavy menstrual flow. People reached for it the way you reach for something close, something familiar, something that has always just been there. Modern researchers have investigated compounds in the plant for possible effects on bleeding and blood vessel activity, which is exactly why casual use can be risky. But avoid it during pregnancy, and avoid it with blood-thinning medications. Unexplained bleeding needs a doctor, not a weed. The most overlooked plant in this list. Growing where no one planted it, asking nothing. Still carrying its old name. That is the thing about weeds. We stop seeing them the moment they grow where we didn't put them. None of these plants replace a doctor. None of them replace a hospital, and some of them are dangerous if misunderstood. But they carry something medicine bottles cannot hold. Memory. The memory of people who looked at the ground carefully enough to notice. One flower made the mouth tingle, one root bled red. One leaf felt like a bandage. One ancient plant polished metal before it ever became a supplement. Some of that knowledge was useful. Some was dangerous. None of it was nothing. The next time you walk past a weed, remember, it may have a story older than the path beneath your feet. Your backyard is not an emergency room anymore. But it still remembers when people treated it like one. If you want more forgotten plant stories, subscribe to Rooted Wonders. Because the wildest stories on Earth are often growing right under our feet. This video is for educational and historical storytelling only. It is not medical advice. Never self-treat with wild plants, and always consult a qualified healthcare provider for any health concern.